Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Filip Černý, and today, together, we're gonna look a little bit closer at supply chain security and how we can leverage network detection and response solutions to combat cyber threats. Before we deep dive into the webinar, let me just go quickly over some housekeeping rules. So this webinar is gonna be recorded. You will receive the recording in the follow-up email. And if anywhere throughout the webinar or anytime throughout the webinar you have any questions, you have a navigational panel below the webinar. There is an icon with a question mark. So feel free to click on that and submit any questions throughout the webinar. And we'll try to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. We also have an attachments in the navigational bar as well. So you can find Flowmon data sheets and high-level overview of the product, as well as a link to our guided demo where you can go through individual use cases that we're trying to solve. Okay, so that's for the housekeeping. And without further ado, let me go over the webinar. So what's going to be discussed today? We're going to be looking at what a supply chain actually is. We're going to mention some examples of supply chain attacks, as well as the impact that those attacks can have. We're going to cover some recommendations and practices that we can take to make sure that we are better secure. And at the end of the webinar, we're going to look at a real-life supply chain attack, and we're going to go step by step through that attack and how it can be viewed through the optics of network detection solution. So let's start by answering the question, what is a supply chain? The supply chain is the chain of manufacturing that gets a product from a very beginning to the very end of its process. This includes raw materials, suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, customers, and consumers. And with all these different points along the chain, there is a lot of opportunity for someone to be able to attack any one of these links in the chain and affect anybody else who might be downstream in that chain. And that is what we consider a supply chain attack. So one of the reasons this works so well is that we tend to trust what we receive from our suppliers and not realizing, of course, that somewhere up the chain there was an attack or there was a vulnerability exploited. And now it has shown itself in the equipment, in the software, or in the technology that we are now putting onto our network. And with so many other steps before that technology arrives on our doorstep, there are plenty of places for an attacker to be able to hide and infect that supply chain and cause harm. Next slide. Yeah. To give you an example, a notable supply chain breach occurred in November of 2013, where the target corporation was the target, and 40 million credit card numbers were stolen. This attack did not start at the Target store. It instead started in Pennsylvania in an HVAC company that's a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning company. And this is an organization where people took care of and maintained the air conditioning systems for many of the Target stores locations. And to be able to interact with Target stores, there was a VPN connection that these technicians would use to be able to send and receive information about the air conditioning systems and maintain them. And then there was an email with a malware that was delivered to this firm in Pennsylvania. And that malware was able to obtain the HPN credentials so that the attackers were able to access the VPN network themselves. And this was the breach of the supply chain. And the attackers were able to take advantage of the HVAC suppliers and gain access inside of the target network. Unfortunately, the target network did not have any additional security. There was no segmentation. So by just breaching the VPN, they got all the access into all parts of the network. So once the attackers got onto the target network, they had access to every single register at all 1,800 target stores. And this is a good example of how supply chain attacks can occur because the attack vector isn't the one that you are expecting. The folks that are on the roof taking care of the air conditioning and heating are not where you would expect a breach to come that would resolve into a steal of over 40 million credit cards. So in the target example, the impact was the stolen 40 million of credit card information, but the supply chain attack can take several forms. First can be credential theft. Attackers may steal login credentials of the supplier of a vendor to gain access to the organization systems. This can be done through phishing attacks, social engineering, or exploiting vulnerabilities in the supplier system. It can be software or firmware tampering. Attackers may inject malicious code into the software or a firmware used by the supplier, which can then be used to compromise the organization's other systems. This can be done during the development process or by compromising the supplier's software distribution channels. Thirdly, data theft. Attackers may steal sensitive data from the supplier systems, which can include data related to the organization's operations, its customers, or its intellectual property. And lastly, denial of service. Attackers may launch a distributed denial of service or a DDoS attack against the supplier systems, which can disrupt the supplier's operations, affect the organization's ability to access critical services, and basically rendering them unoperational. If we are mentioning the denial of service, I'm sure that many of you might have noticed the recent CrowdStrike outage that occurred a couple of weeks ago. Although this was not a supply chain attack caused by any attacker, we can still use this as an example to highlight the severe impact when something in the supply chain goes wrong. The reason I'm mentioning this is because this is considered right now as the worst cyber attack, cyber IT outage in the history. And the glitch came from a corrupted software update from CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike shortly initiated a patch, but the faulty update affected 8.5 million Windows devices, and on which there was the infamous blue screen of death. And the closest to this sort of large-scale outage that became was the WannaCry cyber attack in 2017, where the estimated impact was around 300,000 computers in 150 countries. This was 8.5 million devices. So the affected sectors were airlines, healthcare, financial services. The airline industry was hit particularly hard, with over 4,000 and almost 300 flights canceled globally because of the chaos at the airport. Healthcare systems like Mass General Brigham and Emory Healthcare had to postpone services and revert to manual systems. And financial services also suffered with disruptions in payment systems. Customer cannot access banks worldwide, and so on. This outage was also huge on a global scales. This wasn't just a local issue. It affected services across United States, mainly Canada, UK, Europe, Asia. Major US cities saw disruptions in healthcare and public transportations, while UK's National Health Service faced setbacks in managing patient records and appointments. There were also operational consequences on businesses. Businesses worldwide faced operational issues. Amazon warehouses, for example, where employees struggled with scheduling management. Starbucks had to temporarily close stores because they were not able to take orders through the mobile applications. Big corporations like FedEx and UPS reported substantial disruptions affecting logistics and deliveries. This outage underscores how crucial stable and secure IT infrastructure are for the modern businesses. So I know it must be quite scary when I start saying all of this, but on a positive note, in 2023, so in the last year, approximately 138,000 customers were affected by supply chain cyber attacks worldwide. And this is a far cry from the annual peak of over 263 million impacted customers in early 2019. In the first quarter of 2023, over 60,000 customers reported being impacted by supply chain attacks. Common customer cyber attacks include counterfeiting, drive-by compromise, and malware injections. So we can see that this trend is going downward, and although there was a huge peak in 2021 after COVID, we are managing to keep the supply chain attacks under control, or at the data at least would point to that fact. But still, I think it's important to keep the key security principles in mind. And number one is you need to develop defenses with the assumption that your system will be breached. So when you start to believe that the breach is inevitable, your decision matrix changes to the next step. The question that comes next is not just how to prevent a breach, but also how do we mitigate an attacker's ability to exploit the information they have accessed, or how do we recover from that breach? Secondly, breaches tend to be less about technology failure and more about human error. IT security systems won't secure critical information or intellectual property unless all employers and employees throughout the supply chain use secure cybersecurity practices. And last, there should be no gap between physical and virtual. Sometimes the bad guys exploit lapses in physical security in order to launch a cyber attack. Same way, an attacker looking for ways into a physical location might exploit vulnerabilities to get access. So, what are some of the risks? What are some of the key supply chain risks that are actually out there? This is something where the list could keep on growing. Everything from a compromised software or the hardware purchases from suppliers, compromised software where people rely on open source libraries, people relying on open source images. Again, another challenge. The traditional way that some people think about supply chain is also physical access. Third parties getting access to your network, vendors remotely accessing systems, people physically getting access to the environment, and potentially getting access to different types of systems. I think if I think back to the days where Edward Snowden caused challenges for the NSA, he was simply an NSA contractor who had admin rights and was able to reverse everything from the unclassified network to the hide network. And simply using $100 piece of software he was able to get various different types of data that was across 3 different domains, and he was able to get all the data from the 3 different networks just because he was given the administrator rights. So software security vulnerabilities is another thing. They exist and continue to exist all the time. And at the end of the day, people remotely accessing networks. So I would like to also talk, before I move to the real life scenario, about some general recommendations. So first and foremost, policy and procedures. I can't stress this enough how important this is, and it's important that we document all the policies and procedures. Every organization should really have a way to think about how can they actually address policy and procedures as it pertains to supply chain. Who are the trusted suppliers to an organization? Where should people be getting their systems and their supplies, their software from? This should actually be documented and procedures should be followed. And we really need to have some form of governance around how do we actually monitor and identify what's happening inside our own organizations. Next, it's really important you need to have risk councils. In every organizations, we need to ensure that we've got some sort of supply chain risk council and those are the key stakeholders who know what to do. We need to be able to bring together key players that can provide a holistic end-to-end supply chain risk management strategy. So what does it really mean? It means you've got people that are cross-functional, people that can work across IT, they can work across sourcing, they could be the people that are in your legal team, in your finance department, people that are cross-functional in a way that can really start to understand how to actually write and assess, as well as mitigate any vendor performance, whether it be financial security risk, as well as any corporate social responsibility risk. There are definitely synergies here that we should be thinking about. How do we start baseline security requirements for contracts? How do we integrate some of those security risks with other businesses' risks, so we could actually be upfront in our selection process and ongoing audits? Many of you, no doubt, have either responded to tenders, RFPs, RFIs information. So we should be thinking about how do we start to add some of this information or questions in there around how do we start to scrutinize the vendors that we work with as they're actually starting to provide services to us. Again, that concept, I can assure, using that concept, I can secure my own data, my own systems, but I don't really know how my suppliers are actually securing their systems. They're potentially connecting to mine, or if I'm sharing information and data with them, how do we actually ensure that they are actually securing their own information as well? And lastly, zero trust. Zero trust has been a big buzzword in the recent years, and we see a lot of organizations adopting this framework. Zero trust security means that no one is trusted by default from inside or outside the network, and verification is always required from everyone trying to gain access to resources on the network. And that brings me to the next slide, and which is the SOC visibility triad, where I specifically want to now look closer at to the network detection and response pillar or type of solutions. And so many of you who have seen me do my previous webinars, you might have heard already me talking about this slide. And this is basically what was introduced by Gartner, I believe, maybe 7-8 years ago. And basically, the idea is that you have 3 different technologies. One is CM, so log management and log collections, a endpoint detection and response, so deploying security in end stations, and network detection and response, providing visibility and detecting anomalies based on the change on the behavior. And the idea is that by having these 3 key pillars, you have the core SOC tooling, core security operations center tooling in place. And the idea is that each of these solutions makes up for the other 2's shortcomings. And I would like to briefly look at the network detection and response solution, because we have had prevention systems like firewalls in our networks for a really long time, and attacks still occur. We have had endpoint detection and response solutions, or endpoint protection, on the computers, PCs, for a really long time, and attack still happens. And network detection and response solutions plays a key role, and we see actually a huge adoptions on the market. But I still think it's important that you still need to keep in mind that it's not a question if you get attacked, but when. And having the capability to quickly identify potential threats and be able to respond to them is essential. So first, being proactive and having a constant vigilance and 24/7 monitoring your network traffic to recognize anomalous behavior is really essential. And providing that knowledge, that forensic evidence, to incident response teams, which is basically a specialized groups that manage and respond to security breaches and attacks, is a next step in order to take those proactive measures and stop those breaches from happening. So Let's look now closer into a real life example how a supply chain attack may occur and how you can view it through the optics of network detection and response solution, particularly Flowmon solution. So this is going to be our scenario. Let's say we have a vendor of a help desk system of some application that is being used globally by a large customer base, and the vendor of a help desk system was breached, and an attacker implanted a backdoor into the application. So now attacker has to wait till the victim is going to download the new version of the software, update the help desks in use, and then potentially the attacker can get in through the backdoor that he installed. So on the right side, this is our sample infrastructure. We have some demilitarized zone with the help desk application running. We have some Windows server and a Linux server. And we have a network traffic monitoring connected through a mirror port. So we're monitoring all the network traffic, and we have the external connection to the outside, to the internet, where we have the attacker's machine. So this is really a simple topology. We played this scenario live. We have recorded all the network traffic into the pcap files. So now we can actually replay the whole network and simulate it and use it to demonstrate what network detection and response tools can find and how we can uncover these attackers' footprint in the network. So let's say I'm an attacker. What I'm doing as an attacker, I'm looking for vulnerable help desk systems running on potential victims' premise. So first, I look for some HTTPS services exposed to the internet. I confirm that this is my compromised help desk system. So for example, I can test a specific header that I have implanted into the help desk system. So now I know that this specific customer or this specific network is running the vulnerable help desk systems with my backdoor in it. So I will obtain the domain name for that address, and I will access a specific URL that only I'm as an attacker I'm aware of. And this URL I will activate through this URL I will activate the backdoor. As a result, I will get a reverse shell going back to my machine, which means that now I have a full control of the help desk system with root permissions, and I can do pretty much anything on that machine. How does it look from a defender situation? Now I'm the security operations operator, and this early stage is actually very difficult to recognize, because at this stage you don't have that much reliable footprint in the network, because someone accessing your DMZ with port scanning, looking for open services, it's quite a normal activity. You will see hundreds of events like that. So it will not give you a sign that something really critical is going on yet. So from the defender side, this initial stage is very, very difficult to recognize and respond to. But let's continue with the scenario. This is going to be more interesting from now. Now, as an attacker, now I'm living on the help desk systems, and I can do pretty much whatever I want because I do have the root permissions. So what I'll start is trying to understand the network and the environment around me, so I can take it from there. So I can do some scanning activity to understand what's around, and I can recognize what kind of services are actually running and what kind of applications are around me. And because I can pivot from my initial presence, I can try to attack other services. I can try to compromise other system, potentially get some interesting data and exfiltrate them. And so this is what I'm doing. I know that there are 3 machines around me. I can run a TCP SYN scan to those machines to identify all the different ports and services that are running. So now I know that there is a Windows machine, there is a Linux machine. So as the next step, what I can do, for example, I can take a list of no logins and passwords, and I can run those against the Linux SSH server. So who knows, maybe I will get lucky. What if someone is using a weak password? I might get in. But in this case, attacker was not successful. So he's not able to get in, but he is still leaving the footprint in the network. That is the whole point. So he shifts the attention to the Windows server, where he will exploit the vulnerability called Secret. Secret is a DNS vulnerability that can be remotely exploited. So here we can see the Metasploit framework that has used to exploit this vulnerability, and now we can confirm that the attacker is actually now on the Windows server. I do have all the permissions that I need on the Windows server as an attacker. So next on the Windows server, I will disable the Windows Defender. I don't want to, raise any alarms. I will download the, malicious software, uh, some kind of tool to continue my malicious activity, and I will open again the reverse shell to my machine, so I can continue in a very user-friendly way to command the Windows server and continue my malicious activity. So let's shift back to the network detection and response optics. Now it's going to be more interesting. As a security operator, what I can see is ARP scan initiated by the help desk system in the demilitarized zone, followed by the vertical TCP scan. And this is obviously very unexpected activity. It doesn't make any sense that a server in a DMZ zone would initiate connectivity. So this should be, for me as a security operator, an immediate trigger that something weird and dangerous is going on, and I should isolate the machine. I should start some investigation. I should basically stop this from further development. On the next slide, we have seen the attack against. We have seen the brute force attack, trying different password. This type of activity will leave a visible footprint. So if something completely different, it's something completely different when I log in as an admin to an SSH service. When I'm trying to get in using a brute force attack, using different passwords, different logins, it will create a specific pattern in the network traffic that simply we can recognize and report to. So with the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you understand the stage where the attack is now, and you can take proper action. We have also seen exploitation of the secret vulnerability. This is what is illustrated on this screenshot. So we can see the attack type, we can see the victim, we see the attacker, we understand in detail what's going on. We have all the information about this specific exploitation that just happened. So after all these signs, I should be able, as a defender on this environment, take action and stop this breach from further development. But what happens if I don't stop the breach? What happens if I don't notice? I'm not monitoring the network, and attacker continues the malicious activity. So next thing, as an attacker, I want to really achieve the objective. So in this case, I have found the Windows server. It has some network share storage that contains interesting internal data. So I'm going to take that data and exfiltrate this outside of the network. But I don't want to do it just like that, sending it directly from the Windows server. I still want to do it in a smart way to continue stay under the radar of the detection tools, so I won't get discovered. So first, I'm going to do. I'm going to transfer this data from the Windows server into the help desk system, because as an attacker, I believe that this help desk system is being used from the internet, and it would be kind of normal activity that this machine is communicating to the outside. And also, I don't want to do it by some simple FTP upload to some external server. I want to do it through an alternative protocol. So I'm thinking as an attacker that I will kind of make fool from those detection tools. So I'm pretending to be DNS traffic, and I'm exfiltrating this data. So one machine is sending data out from the TCP stack, and on the other hand, on the other machine, I'm receiving the data, storing again into the file, and it looks like the DNS traffic. And as a last step, I want to do some real damage to the organization. So yes, on one way, I can encrypt the data, leave a ransomware, a ransom node, and basically make a ransomware attack out of this. But I'm going to do something else, maybe something a little bit more disruptive. I'm using a vulnerability of the Windows server when I can corrupt the file system. It won't be disabled on the network. This is exploitation. It won't be disabled on the network, this exploitation as such, but the impact will be visible in the network traffic, which we will see. So because of this specific vulnerability, it leads the server is going to be rebooting, and it's going to be showing error, and it won't be able to recover. It won't be able to repair it. So the only way for a security operator to fix it is going to be to restore the system from the backup or reinstall it. So this is how I, as an attacker, have successfully accomplished my objectives. I've managed to exfiltrate the data and cause so much damage that the IT will be, if they're not detecting my activity, they will have to first deal with the unresponsive server before they might realize that some files were actually stolen. So let's look at the network detection and response optics again. So I have detected both data transfers, so both collections of the data and exfiltration by using the behavioral-based methods. I can see MITRE attack tactic and technique. So I've detected, lateral movement and exfiltration. We can see when the attack occurred, what was the source of the attack. So I have all the evidence to analyze this when I discover this and stop it from further spread. I've detected the DNS anomaly, so that was another step that the attacker did. And lastly, since the server was basically made unoperational, we can recognize the failure to access the Samba data showing a service, Samba data sharing service, and that's detected by Flowmon as well. So we can see also that now that service is not available, that anomaly is detected, and how it again connects to MITRE attack framework as an impact tactic. And again, I have timestamps, I have the source, I have all the evidence to understand what was going on. So this way, network detection and response optics will provide you a complete picture of attackers' activity. And I really like, me personally, I'm really like showing all these different stages of an attack through MITRE attack framework. So MITRE attack framework is generally well recognized within cybersecurity community, and it shows you different tactics and techniques, and simply put, stages of an attack which attackers go through until he gets through the end to the final impact stage. So as a security operator, it's easier for you to recognize what is more critical, what kind of anomalies you should focus on, and basically stop them before they cause further impact. So this capability was provided by a solution called Flowmon, and you can think of Flowmon as having an AI-powered network security analyst at your fingertips that is tirelessly monitors your network 24/7, analyzing the traffic patterns and identifying the potential threats in real time. And that's what Flowmon delivers. You have advanced threat detections where you can distill thousands of alerts into a few security incidents. you gain real insights and actionable intelligence, and are able to shorten time to investigate the attacks and automate the response. And you have full observability into your hybrid cloud environments and can facilitate smooth network operations and faster root cause analysis. So the value from a cybersecurity standpoint is quite clear. You are able to minimize the breach by proactively monitoring the network and stop the breaches at early stage. You can reduce the number of events by automatically connecting the dots between seemingly unrelated events, build a full picture of a security incident, and focus only on the higher priority ones. You can increase your technical staff efficiency, because with Flowmon you are enabling less experienced team members to conduct complex investigations by giving that simple understanding of what we are detecting, that easy to understand prioritization, and so on. You can gain more confidence in responding to incidents with noiseless insight and hard evidence on root cause, severity, damage, and impacted systems. Remedial actions are much more accurate, and you have that same equalized protection across your heterogeneous environments. So that and now we're coming to the end of my webinar, and we have introduced the supply chain attacks, what it is, and how you can actually proactively detect it with network detection and response capabilities such as Flowmon. So what I would like to do next is to offer you a chance to learn and understand the solution a little bit closer, so you can get in touch with us. We can schedule a personalized demonstration just for you, understand the use cases that you are trying to solve, and see if Flowmon network detection and response solutions might be the good fit for you. And if that even it's not that, but even further, we are happy to do a free proof of concept. That means deploying a solution in your environment. So it's not just demo environment where we're showing you our capabilities, but in your specific environments, tackling your specific use cases. We can show you and maybe uncover something that you are not even aware of, and help you to get your IT environment higher level of security, I would say. So with that, I'm reaching towards the end of my webinar, and let me see if we have some questions. We do. So let me go through them. First questions. So it's a top port. What happens to this when the DDoS attacks keeps on going to the machine using the top of the network? So I'm not sure if I'm understanding it right, but so using that tab, we are only receiving the traffic, like the copy of the traffic. So when we deploy Flowmon solution, it's passive to the network. So we're just taking a full copy of the traffic by deploying our probes using tabs, or sending like network telemetry export from IT infrastructure devices. So usually if there would be a DDoS attack, it would in fact impact that core router core switch, but we would still be able to detect it first. So we actually have case studies how you can detect DDoS. Okay. Looks like there are not any more questions. So with that, I went through webinar a little bit early, but a little bit quickly. But with that, let me say goodbye. This is the end of our webinar. If you have any questions, any other questions, feel free to reach out to us throughout the web, and we'll be happy to have a conversation with you. Thank you very much. I've been Filip Černý. Good day.